Real quick, before we get into the show, I wanted to share a new service called Getita that Ken and I have been using that has made us over $10,000 in Amazon reimbursements. The service requires no monthly subscription, and Getita collects a small percentage of the money they recover for you. It takes less than 5 minutes to set up and works on all Amazon marketplaces. Go to Getita.com, Getida, and enter promo code FTM400. That's FTM for Firing the Man 400 to get your first $400 in reimbursements commission free. How much money does Amazon owe you?
Welcome everyone to the Firing the Man podcast, a show for anyone who wants to be their own boss. If you sit in a cubicle every day and know you are capable of more, then join us. This show will help you build a business and grow your passive income streams in just a few short hours per day. And now your hosts, serial entrepreneurs David Schomer and Ken Wilson.
Welcome, everyone, to the Firing the Man podcast. On today's episode, we have the pleasure to interview Kelly Kennedy. Kelly is a recovering Canadian CPA who left his 9-to-5 job in oil and gas to buy and operate a blog and content writing company, and teaches finance and accounting part-time at a local college. Teaching lets him pay the bills and keeps his wife from divorcing him. Prior to being a CPA, Kelly was a student recruiter at a local university and a political speechwriter and organizer of provincial politics. He graduated during the financial crisis, Great Recession, and could not get a job. So he and two friends rode their bicycles across Canada end-to-end over 64 days. Welcome to the show, Kelly.
Hey, happy to be here, David.
Thank you. So to kind of set the scene for our listeners, can you share your background and experiences as to how you got to where you're at today?
Yeah, for sure. Going from a CPA to owning a writing company is different, and you're probably wondering how I got here. So looking at my background, or if you're looking at my resume or my LinkedIn, it's going to follow very chronological order. It's going to look very linear, and I think that most do, but it's anything but. And I'd say the average person, it's anything but. It's definitely, I started here, I went there. I like to say it was planned, but in reality, it wasn't necessarily planned. So I finished my undergraduate in business in 2008, and that was the height or just the beginning of the financial crisis. So unemployment in my province was like 14%, and the only jobs that I could get are the jobs that wouldn't even let me pay my student loans at that time. So at the time, I'm like, well, what could we do to kind of fill the summer? And me and my buddy are like, let's ride our bicycles across Canada. So we decided to do that. We got a bit of funding so we could pay the bills during that time. And then when we finished, I had wicked tan lines. I was in pretty good shape, but I'm broke. I am broke. So I got a job as a political speechwriter for the political party that was in power at the time, provincially. And it was definitely an entry-level job, but, a lot of cool stories from that. So if you ever hear a politician, especially in Canada, politics is way different in the States than in Canada. But generally, if you hear a politician giving a speech that's super boring, generally there was a 24-year-old writing it, 22-year-old. And then I did that for about 2 years and did some time at the university I attended, where I'd go into high schools and try to get students to come into the university I attended, try to be motivational, cool job. But I think I left there making like $45,000 a year, like just not enough. I wasn't getting ahead. So I looked at everybody around me. I'm like, well, what do people around me that I want to be like, in 5 to 10 years, what do they have that I don't to get where they are? And I'm like, well, they have more education. So I did the traditional route. I'm like, hey, I'll go get an MBA. I got into the school I wanted, a Canadian school, and MBAs in Canada are just as expensive as they are in the US. So I left a job at $45,000 a year, took out an MBA loan of $80,000 times. I got my undergraduate loans with that as well. So I went and did that. I finished. And after all the excitement of finally being done, all the graduation pictures, I'm like, holy crap, I am in debt. I am in so much debt. $119,000 to be exact. And I'm like, I need a job, a good job right now. So I was able to get into oil and gas, thankfully. But what I realized when I'm in my cubicle, and I know Kathleen in your last episode talked about this too, is that with all that debt, even though the job was great, I was indentured. Like I was stuck there. If I lost my job, I was in serious financial trouble. So I'm like, great job. I'm getting paid well, but I can't leave. And it was an awful feeling. I always knew that I wanted to do stuff on my own, but I couldn't. So over a decade, I was there for almost 10 years. I was able to pay off my student loans and dabble. And when I say dabble, I mean just get my feet just wet, kind of shiny object syndrome into some entrepreneurial stuff. I had to, really set myself down and realize am I doing what I want to do? I'm pushing 40 now. My hairline is receding. And I was listening to a podcast, Entrepreneurs on Fire. And there was someone on there and they were saying, and it really drove home. It's like, if you met your 70-year-old self and, you got to see what they accomplished, would you be happy? And I was on a path where I would not be happy. And I had silver handcuffs, I had that defined benefit pension. I'm like, if I don't leave now, I'm never going to leave. And so I decided to look at buying a business. And so I did a bit of due diligence looking at companies out there, and I found a writing company that was for sale. I'm like, well, this looks ridiculous. So I dug into it and did some due diligence. And I'm like, man, this is an awesome company. Like, I am going to do this. And long story short, in June of 2021, I bought it from a guy in Kelowna, which is a province next to mine, brought it to Calgary where I live. And yeah, I didn't operate it full time for the first year. I hired 3 people to do it. That was the wrong decision. I mean, I can get into that later. But it took me about 12 months to realize I needed to quit my job and do it full time. And that brings me to now. So I do that full time, which means like basically 2 full-time jobs. And then I teach so that my wife doesn't divorce me.
So Kelly, thanks for sharing your story. Got a lot of questions, a lot of follow-up questions too. But before we get into those, I want to dig into the two friends and you rode across Canada end to end over 64 days. Like, I've never done that, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners haven't either. And so like, live through your journey and maybe share like 1 or 2 things that you thought was amazing or that you learned on that expedition.
Yeah, totally. I learned a lot. We started in British Columbia, and if you're familiar with British Columbia, the Rocky Mountains are in British Columbia. So we started on Vancouver Island, where the capital of BC is, and we did the cliche thing of putting our bikes into the ocean, the Pacific Ocean. We knew we'd do that in the Atlantic after a period of time. And so, yeah, we got going, and actually there was 3 of us who started, and we had a driver. And I can tell you that what's worse than riding your bicycle across Canada is driving across Canada at 30 kilometers an hour. So we had a follow van. So there actually was 4 of us. What was interesting, it's a good story now, it wasn't good at the time, and I definitely learned a lot, is that one of the guys on the trip, and he was the most fit by far, like professional bodybuilder, endurance kind of guy. He's the one that formed the team to do this. He decided, and he wasn't built for running, but he decided to run a marathon like a month before the bike trip, and he hurt his knee really bad. So by the time we were about to start the trip, he couldn't cycle. He could barely cycle, and we had to cycle 150 kilometers a day on average. So what we did, and it kind of goes to teamwork, is, we went to Calgary from where we lived, 2.5 hours away, and we rented a tandem bike to actually tandem him from Victoria until he got better. So that actually happened from BC all the way to like Saskatchewan. So that was like almost 20 days of riding. And eventually he couldn't continue on cycling, but he finished the trip with us. So we tried to continue on with him as much as possible. But can you imagine riding a tandem bike with somebody, and he's probably 240 pounds, up Rocky Mountains?
He's not able to pedal either, right?
Hey, one leg he was. Yeah, you learn a lot. You learn a lot when it comes to that. What else? When it comes to business, something that relates is that even if, your journey or what you're doing is huge, and at the end of it, everyone's like, holy man, you did that. It actually wasn't that hard because we were consistent. Day to day, we knew exactly what we needed to do, and we just needed to cycle. And actually, it wasn't that bad. Some of the weather at times was awful, but every day we took a little bite. And then after 64 days, we're in Newfoundland. If you know where that is, like, it's an island on the one coast of Canada. And it was an amazing feeling. But I can tell you, in terms of some funny stories that happen along the way. 2 people on our trip, we stayed in campsites, and some of these campsites are just horrendous. Like, these are bad. And you should never use a hot tub in a very bad campsite, meaning they don't I don't know why, but I didn't go in the hot tub after a day of riding, but 2 of the people did, and they got some kind of super bug infection, and they got all these disgusting rashes that the editor might want to take out my story here. It would not go away. And finally, after about 1,000 kilometers of riding with these rashes, we had to go to emergency room in the middle of nowhere and get them laced and get them drained and all that stuff. In that small area we're riding, it's northern Ontario. This is a different friggin' world. Like, there's nobody up there. Black bears everywhere, kind of dangerous, moose everywhere, and the bugs, black flies. I didn't know what black flies were. And the bugs bite you so much that if you're not used to it, your immune system starts going overdrive, and my lymph nodes look like golf balls on the sides of my neck. I couldn't even turn around. It was just bonkers. But we had to cycle 150 kilometers every single day, regardless of what was happening. So you made it work. So it does help in entrepreneurship when you're having a bad day. It's like, hey, just take a bite, continue on.
That's huge. Great journey, and thanks for sharing. Yeah, and note to anybody listening, don't hop in a hot tub, a random campsite in Canada. That won't turn out well. Cool. Okay, so first question I have, you you kind of like touched on it a little bit in your intro, but I want to dig into a little bit deeper for all the people listening that still have full-time jobs and they're starting a business, or maybe they're going to buy one, and then they're faced with that decision to quit their job. So can you kind of walk the audience through like what was going through your mind? Like, how did you make your decision process, and then when and what really forced you to ultimately quit your job?
Yeah. So realistically, like being completely honest with myself when I answer this question, I needed to make sure that financially I was okay if things went south. And that's probably the CPA in me. So I made sure that financially we could handle it if things really went south. And I also knew that I wouldn't quit the job that I was in unless I had something firm to go to, meaning I couldn't quit a job and build a business from scratch. I had to have a business there. So I knew to get me off the chair, out of my cubicle, out of my office, I needed to buy a business. And so I bought the business, and that was really the kick in the butt. It's like, hey, this is real. I have something to go to. I have something to build, and let's make this happen. In terms of, relationship wise, that's a difficult conversation to have with your significant other. She was very supportive of it. She knew I wasn't necessarily happy where I was at. She's given me some room to try this out, which I very much appreciate. But I can tell you that's an ongoing discussion and battle that you have with your significant other. Like, we can't do the vacations that we normally did. We can't go out for dinner as much as we could. We met with a mortgage broker last week because our mortgage is coming due, and it's more difficult to get a mortgage when you're owning your own business because you try to reduce your taxable income, and that's not good when you're getting a mortgage. So these conversations happen weekly, and it's something that it's just part of the game.
I would like to dive into the day that you fired the man. Let's and be as detailed as you can. Who did you talk to? What did you say? Did you do something after to celebrate? Let's go take a trip down memory lane and go to that day.
Yeah, totally. I wish I could, I had something awesome like Office Space or something. I grabbed a photocopier and started smashing it with a bat, but I didn't do that. Actually, I liked the man that I was working for at that time. I actually was on the same capital project for almost a decade. So I knew the people really well, and I wasn't going to burn any bridges. That being said, I also know if you don't burn bridges, oftentimes you'll go back, but that is not the intention. So that day I got my boss into a meeting room, and I told him and it was really bad timing. Realistically, is it ever good timing? And I told him, I'm like, I bought a business. I'm leaving. I know it's not a good time. Our director had just decided to retire. And I'm like, but I'll give you, 3 weeks to a month, and I'll even stay part-time until you can hire somebody. And he was really good about it. He's just like, you know what? It's complicated to move you from full-time to part-time. Let's just call it a day on this date. So it was 3 weeks. And those 3 weeks are kind of surreal because when you're in an office for that long, you probably experienced that, David. It's like, that's your life. And all of a sudden one day it's not. So there was a big party where we drank way too much. We ate a lot of food and reminisced. Then the next day reality hits. And honestly, it was a great feeling. It was a great feeling to finally do what I wanted to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And how long was it from that point in time to when you took on part-time teaching? Because I think this is something that a lot of people think it's all or nothing. A steady paycheck every so often is nice, especially when the entrepreneurial roller coaster is not every 2 weeks. And so what can you talk about that decision?
Yeah. So before I was, considering leaving, or before I put the line in the sand, okay, I'm leaving my job 100% for the business, I knew I needed something in the background just in case. And you're right. Like, you can always have something that is kind of guaranteed, just a small amount on the side that really helps and also keeps your family members happy. So I saw at a school that I attended like many years ago, they were looking for an accounting instructor, and I applied, and it's adjunct. So meaning it's contract, the pay is horrendous, but it is probably one of the coolest experiences you can imagine teaching. You got students that pay a lot of money to learn from you. You can tell some good stories, and if they walk away learning something, it's a neat experience. But you're right. Every 2 weeks I get a paycheck. It is much, much less than I used to get, but it's consistent. In terms of stress level, it helps a lot when you're an entrepreneur, when you can count on even just a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I wanted to dig into, this is a question that I often get asked a lot myself. How long was it since you quit your position as CPA in oil and gas, and then till now? Has it been, how many years has it been?
Oh, it's been 10 months.
10 months. Okay. So in those 10 months, have you ever felt like regret or any like second thoughts, or has it been, roses and chocolate, or can you share a little bit?
Or motherhood and apple pie, like we like to say up here. So in terms of regret, I can honestly say I haven't had a heart of regret. I have had more situations than I can count where I'm like, Jesus, what have I got myself into in terms of the business, but not, hey, am I doing the right thing? So I think I'm very fortunate that way. If I had regret, it'd be very difficult to continue on. on, have that consistency. But yeah, I've learned so much in the last 10 months and since I bought the business that they don't teach you in school. Entrepreneurship is definitely a sport that you learn by practicing and failing multiple times. And you're only going to win when you keep getting back up. Most people don't. So I just need to, when something bad happens, and it happens every week, I put down a sheet of paper and I do my gratitude list. And, when I read all that, like I have it pretty good. I have a wife, I have a house, I can pay my bills, I eat the food that I want, probably too much, and I'm doing what I want. And sometimes you just need to remind yourself of that.
Absolutely. And one thing that I really like what you said is that you're failing every week. And that's something that we're feeling that too as we run our businesses. There's mistakes every week. And I think that one thing that holds people back from firing the man is the what if game. What if something doesn't work out? Well, guess what? I can tell you with 100% certainty, something will not work out. And it's that attitude of this is a feedback loop. I'm here to learn and I'm here to get better. I think that's absolutely the attitude you have to have or you'll get burned out really fast. And so I think that's good for our listeners to hear. Ken and I try to be as open about this on podcasts as we can, that it is not all passive income. In fact, none of it is. We work for all of it. I hate that word. I hate the word passive income because at least I haven't found it. We're working for every dollar we make. And so I really like that position. So on this topic, what has been the costliest mistake that you've made?
I made a few and I'm not embarrassed by them because I have gotten to a place, thankfully, where I know it's almost like, me going to a university or post-secondary and paying for these lessons, you know what I mean? But I'm going to give you two, if that's okay. The first one is, and, I think this is a valuable lesson for anybody that's listening that is considering buying a business, is sometimes you're so excited to buy a business that you get kind of caught up in it and you're not willing to walk away if the deal isn't what you need it to be. Not necessarily what you want, but what you need it to be. Realistically, I overpaid for my company. Did I overpay a lot? Absolutely not. But as an accountant, I do have a degree of regrets. I'm like, I probably didn't need to pay that. Do I think about it every day? No, but that is a costly mistake that I made initially. The second mistake that I made, and this is fundamental, I think, to buying a business, is that no one is going to work in your business as hard as you. And if you're not willing to work hard in your business, your staff aren't. Your staff are going to look at you and how hard you're working, and they're only going to work like 60 to 80% of the effort that you're going to put in. They don't have as much skin in the game. You can have the best people in the world. So when I had 2 full-time people running my company, great people, but I was only doing 10 to 15 hours a week and I wasn't leading them as much as I needed to. I had my normal job. So long story short, our sales dropped by like 50% in 12 months from when I bought the company. So that was awful. And that actually, probably should have had that my answer earlier that, what really got you off your seats. And that was part of it. It's like, I had to save it. I needed to get in there and really dig in. And then my third thing that a very expensive lesson is when you have to hire, don't hire the closest person to you. Actually go out and hire people. Don't hire friends, don't hire family because they're very difficult to manage. And I made that mistake. I hired a friend of mine and full-time, basically took all my margin away. Unfortunately, just wasn't a good fit.
Yeah, those are all, like David mentioned earlier, like mistakes, and sharing those, it's super valuable for us as entrepreneurs, everybody listening, to know that, entrepreneurs make mistakes every week. Every day, every week, every year, we're always going to make mistakes, but something you said earlier, it's just like a little bit at a time. And so it's a long game. It's a long journey. And if you're learning from those mistakes, then you're getting ahead. And so you're kind of falling forward is what we like to call it. Thanks for sharing those. Next question that I have for you is, so now you own a small business full-time, so part-time teaching, owning the business and working in that full-time. How has that impacted your personal life? Positive, negative?
In terms of like my relationship with my wife, it actually hasn't impacted it negatively. We have to have more conversations about the finances because before, we just put all our money in one account and we didn't have trouble paying our bills. That's different now. I manage every single dollar coming in and coming out, business and personal, and you have to just to make things work. In terms of relationship wise, in terms of like my network, really good people, but I'm an accountant. I worked in oil and gas, and my professional network is still doing that. So I was doing something that was completely foreign to them. So I find myself, and I tried not to do it, but I almost feel like I have to justify to my old network that I'm doing the right thing. Again, I try not to do that as much because it's almost like admitting that you made the wrong mistake, but it's interesting how your personal relationships do change because, I identified as an accountant for a really long time. And David, you might have experienced that too. And all of a sudden one day you're an entrepreneur and all of a sudden people are like, what's going on? Like, are you okay?
Absolutely. I can relate to that. And you want to talk about a profession that attracts people that tend to be risk averse. It's the accounting profession. That was one of the things that attracted me to it was I know there's always going to be a job. I can make a good income and I am a risk averse person, and the entrepreneurial life is not. It's full of risks. And so I think knowing that about yourself but also like, I think I've grown as like that. Some of that risk aversion was not coming from a place of like logic. It was like a gut, something deeply rooted and when you ask yourself, what's the worst case scenario? And then you put the answer on paper. Sometimes it's not as bad as you may think it is. And so, yeah, no, I definitely, so.
Accountants have a bit of a stereotype, don't they? Risk adverse.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, pocket protectors. Their brain is organized into rows and columns like an Excel sheet. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a personality type. And I think that you definitely bring in some advantages into running a business. But I think you also need to be conscious of like where your shortcomings are. And like speaking for myself, that was risk. And so I am sure that there are people listening to this, whether they're an accountant or not, that are probably sitting in your shoes 10 months ago, where they're like, I want to leave. I want to leave so bad. I'm not happy. I would regret staying in this job until I'm 70. What advice did you give to them or to your younger self on kind of navigating this tricky process?
Maybe I'll echo the thing that you just said is that if you actually look at the risks and the risk ranges of what could potentially happen if you make that leap. And the reality is it's not going to be near as bad as you think. And the reality is people know from interviewing people that are on their deathbed, like the number one regret is not taking those chances. So you need to ask yourself, like, are you doing the things that you want to do? And is that going to make you happy long term? That being said, I know I'm privileged from a standpoint where I don't have a family in terms of kids, responsibilities like that, which make the decision a little bit more difficult. That being said, that doesn't mean that it's not impossible. And it doesn't mean you can't plan your way to do that. You can be very structured, you can be very logical and rational and risk adverse and still do it. You just have those frank conversations with mentors, people around you, but most importantly, probably your significant other and those people that, truly, truly care about you. That being said, a little caveat there is that not all advice is good advice. And a lot of times people are going to tell you things that make themselves feel better because they're worried about you than what you should be doing.
That's excellent. And David and I both have had people in our lives, trying to give us advice and all that. And, it's one thing that I always think of. And when someone's giving me advice, it's like, well, is that person on the battlefield or not? If they're not on the battlefield, I'm not going to give much weight to that advice. If they're on the battlefield, then I'll give a lot of weight to that advice. And so, yeah, that's really cool. The next question I have is, now you've owned the business for a while. You had mentioned you did some due diligence. You've kind of went through the whole process. Can you share with us anything you've learned along this process that you wish you would have known day one?
Yeah, totally. A couple things. First one is that, and this is the first question you always ask the person selling the business, and you're never going to get the right answer. You're never going to get the really true answer, but you need to find it because it's worth money. Why are you selling a business? If it's so good, why are you selling it? Like, just keep it going, find a way to systematize it, and then keep bringing in that revenue. So when I asked that question, I didn't get the right answer. Doing due diligence, and then after that fact came clear what the true answer was. And if I knew that would have been leverage to get a lower price. Yeah, that cost me money. That being said, I don't know how I could have got the real answer out of the seller. It is one of those things that I look back, I'm like, yeah, maybe if I could have got the answer to that question. The second thing during due diligence, and this is something that I think I was blinded to by the shiny light syndrome that a lot of us go through, or shiny object syndrome, is that I was so excited to buy this business that I knew I should be more concerned about the clients that we had as a company being tied to the current owner, meaning that the personal relationships the current owner had with these people, he had for a really long time, and not to say they would leave to go to work with him. They couldn't because we had a non-compete agreement, which are impossible to enforce, but that's another story. Basically, I found out that a lot of these clients weren't really good fits for me in the direction of the company. And so over probably about 6 months, like I was saying, we lost probably half of our clients, and a lot of them we wanted to lose. We fired a lot of our clients, and we needed to do that. And we had a bunch of clients that were great people, but they're actually motivational speakers. A large percentage of our clients were motivational speakers, and some of them they demanded more than they were paying for. And so over time, it just wasn't profitable for us to offer the services to them. So we let them go. So if I knew early on that we would lose so much business from that, whether it was intentional, we fired them or not, I probably would have asked for, again, a lower price. But I was blinded by the shiny light syndrome.
You see that happen in real estate a lot, where people are buying a house and they they picture them and their wife sitting on a porch before they're thinking about like the purchase price and how much is this thing actually worth. And I think that's definitely a natural thing to go through. So what is the company? Can you share a little bit more about the company?
Yep. So the company is BlogWorks. It is primarily a blog writing company. So we write blog articles for clients in almost every industry, primarily in the US. And the idea is that we help them build authority in whatever space that they're in. We know our clients can likely write those articles themselves, but they can probably spend their time doing better things or higher valued things, higher leverage things. So we go straight on their behalf, or we do white label content for them. And we also juice them all up for SEO. So we write these content pieces for authority, but we make sure from an SEO standpoint, it's fully optimized. And one thing that we do with the content, and it's something that, I hope most of your listeners will understand, is that when you invest in content, whether you're investing your time to do it yourself or you're paying someone to do it, you have a very valuable asset there. And you just don't want to have it done or completed and post on your website and have just hope that you might get some traffic from it or hope you get business from it, which happens a lot. So what we do is we'll repurpose the content for our clients, and we'll come up with a content calendar. We schedule it, we automate it, and we post on their behalf to Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and they don't worry about any of their social media channels at all. So we try to get them more value through their content. But there's other things that people can do that we don't necessarily offer, but I think overall content provides that, is that you can basically repurpose your content for other ways of generating business or creating value for your customers. And one piece is that after, say, 10 or 15 blog articles, you can compile that, get somebody to edit it, and boom, you've got an ebook. And you can use that to get email traffic. You can use that for a variety of different things. You can put it on Amazon, get 2 sales, and tell people on your website that you're an Amazon seller, or it's, you sell your book on Amazon. Content, key thing I guess I'd want to drive home is that when you invest in content, it's an asset and you need to manage that asset.
Excellent. So Kelly, all of our guests, we put them through the ringer in what's called the fire round. Are you ready?
I have.
Before we get to the fire round, David, anything else?
No, this has been an excellent interview, and looking forward to Kelly's answers in the fire round.
Awesome. All right, Kelly, what is your favorite book?
My favorite book. So this is my favorite book, and I tell my accounting students this, my finance students, that anybody can do math, anybody can use Excel, but very few people can actually communicate what the numbers are telling you. So communication is key. And I'd say How to Win Friends and Influence People is probably my favorite book. I've read that quite a few times. When I was in university, I was reading that book once in the cafeteria, and the title of the book's awful, right? How to Win Friends and Influence People. There was a table full of girls, quite attractive girls next to me, and I could hear them laughing. They're like, that dude's reading a book on how to win friends. But I've read it like 5 times. Yeah, the next one, have you read that one too?
I love that book.
Another one that really, his personality is not necessarily my style, but MJ DeMarco's Millionaire Fastlane, I really like that one. It's just common sense stuff when it comes to personal finance, and I really enjoyed that one. Never Split the Difference, which I saw on your website, is a good one. Canadians, we call ourselves sometimes painfully rational or painfully nice, and the joke is Canadians are so nice because we have no choice, because we're north of the US, and the US has the largest military in the world. But Never Split the Difference really helped me in that I found myself, and this might be the CPA in me as well, is that when you're negotiating, I would negotiate with myself beforehand. So I would try to find the middle ground before negotiating. And so I would actually start my negotiations at the middle ground, which I thought was rational. And of course, I got just killed anytime I was negotiating. So that book really told me to anchor and never to basically back down, never split the difference. And actually I ended up in litigation, which is another story in another business I was in. And that book helped me a lot.
That's all great books, all great books. Next one, what are your hobbies?
You probably assume cycling, but cycling is actually not my hobby anymore. What are my hobbies? Probably honestly just going to the gym. As I'm getting older now, I'm getting a dad bod. I'm not even a dad, so I need to address my dad bod. So I go to the gym. Honestly, my hobby is my work now, which is BlogWorks, and I love it. I'm excited when I get up in the morning. I might be still groggy and I need my coffee, but I am excited when I get up in the morning. So
that's awesome. Love the energy. What is one thing that you do not miss about working for the man?
Spending all that money on business clothes that you didn't want to wear, not comfortable in the first place. I remember for 5 years there, really tight suits were in, man, those were awful. But yeah, probably buying all those clothes that afterwards you're not going to going to have to wear. I got a closet full of clothes, Dave. You probably have the same things. Like, what am I going to do with all these clothes?
Yeah, weddings and funerals. And
Yeah.
that's it.
That's awesome. A shout out to anybody listening. If you're driving when you get home, do this, but go to our YouTube channel, Firing the Man, and then look up our Unmissed series. David's got a bit on there about neckties. It's killer. All right, last one. What do you think sets apart successful e-commerce entrepreneurs from those who give up, fail, or never get started?
One would be courage. Just have that courage to believe in yourself. I know it's cliche to say, but you don't need to see the full staircase to take that first step. Just take that first step, and then consistency wins. You don't have to ride 7,500 kilometers in one day. You just ride 150 kilometers a day, and you will get there at a certain point in time.
Excellent advice, Kelly. David, over to you. Close out the show.
Awesome. Well, Kelly, I want to thank you for being a guest on the Firing the Man podcast. If people are interested in getting in touch with you, what would be the best way?
Go to the website, yourblogworks.com, and look at the content that we have on there. If you want to schedule a meeting, happy to have a call. I was so excited to be on your podcast here. Like I said, this is my very first podcast. We're always going to have that connection. And this is a really cool call. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Before you go, we wanted to share a new service that Ken and I have been using called Getita that has made us over $10,000 in Amazon reimbursements. The service requires no monthly subscription, and Getita collects a small percentage of the money they recover for you. It takes less than 5 minutes to set up and works on all Amazon marketplaces. Go to Getita.com, Getida.com, and enter promo code FTM400. That's FTM for Firing the Man 400 to get your first $400 in reimbursements commission free. How much money does Amazon owe you?